What's the real difference between speaking up and just making noise? So today, we're going to unpack this really sharp, modern parable that gets right to the heart of that question, especially for our digital lives. Welcome to the parable of the unplugged controller.
So picture this, a massive arena. It's kind of part Roman Colosseum, part massive gamer den. They call it the Grand Tournament of Freedom. And this booming announcement, it greets every single person, promising them the ultimate power of expression. They each get handed a controller, their one tool for shaping this brand new world.
All right, so welcome to the tournament. This is where it all begins, where this beautiful, kind of compelling illusion of action is built.
And just like that, the crowd goes absolutely wild. Everyone starts mashing their buttons, totally convinced they're changing the world. You can just feel the energy, the passion, justice, rebellion. Hey, even a plea for nuance. It's this incredible storm of activity, a roar of what feels like real democratic action.
And then there's this pause. After all that frantic button mashing, all that shouting, there's just silence. The scoreboards are totally blank. The lights in the arena haven't changed. And this feeling of confusion just starts to spread. I mean, if everyone's participating, shouldn't something, anything, be different?
And that's when the announcer's voice just cuts right through the confusion with this ice-cold clarification. Look, the point was never to actually create change. It was all about giving you the feeling that you have a voice. Pressing the buttons is the whole point. The outcome is completely irrelevant.
So how did all that passion, all that energy lead to, well, nothing? It all comes down to the controller itself.
And this brings us to the core idea, the unplugged controller. It's such a powerful symbol, right? It represents any kind of speech that gives you this illusion of participating, but it's completely cut off from any power to actually make a difference.
You see, the system has basically taught its citizens to believe that the performance of outrage is the revolution, that just reacting and shouting is the end goal, not just a step towards it.
And this really breaks down the three critical ways they were disconnected. Their actions weren't plugged into truth, they had no link whatsoever to actual power, and maybe the most important one, they weren't even truly connected to each other. They were just shouting into their own little private voids.
Okay, so if the game isn't really about making an impact, then how do you keep score? Well, the system has its own kind of twisted metrics for success.
Take a look at the so-called Great Debate happening on stage. It shows us exactly how this all works. The whole conversation about freedom isn't about principles, it's about engagement numbers and brand deals. It's pure performance, measured by who gets seen the most. And then, the official leaderboard finally pops up, and it just lays the whole system's values completely bare. Just look at those stats. Views? 0. Impact? 0. The only thing that's maxed out? Ego boost. This game was never designed to make you effective. It was designed to make you feel important.
And to top it all off, the moderator's cheerful sign-off just says everything you need to know. This whole hollow spectacle is presented as the height of democracy, and it's celebrated with confetti made out of old, forgotten tweets. It's a perfect, almost tragic image of what this system really cares about.
Okay, so you have to figure, sooner or later, someone is going to notice the game is rigged, right? What happens when a player stops staring at the big screen and, looks down at their own hands?
And this question. This is the real turning point of the entire story. In a world where every single person is just staring straight ahead at the flashy lights and the promise of participation, what happens when one person breaks that trance and actually examines the tool they've been given?
And here it is, the moment of absolute clarity. It's not some big, complicated, philosophical argument. It's just a simple, physical truth. The controller, the very thing that was supposed to be their freedom, is a total lie, and the whole illusion just shatters. The system's response is, well, it's immediate and incredibly revealing. The person who speaks the truth isn't treated like a dissenter or a critic. No, they get labeled a malfunctioning participant. See, in the eyes of the system, they're not wrong. They're just broken. They're a bug. And the system's immune response, these content moderation avatars, they swoop in to remove the error. But as they're getting dragged away, the rebel manages one last shout, making that crucial distinction between real speech and simulation, between genuine freedom and just performative theater. They finally put a name to the game, calling it out for exactly what it is.
So, all of this brings us to the final moral of the story. Now that we've seen the simulation for what it is, what does real speech actually look like?
So the first huge mistake they made was mistaking noise for meaning. They thought the sheer volume of their shouting was the same as a meaningful conversation, but noise without a real connection, it's just noise.
The second mistake, this one's a little more subtle. They were given a platform, a controller. They had access to the arena, and they confused that access with actual agency, the power to really create change. Just because you have a microphone, it doesn't mean anyone's really listening, or that you have the power to act on what you're saying.
And this final error, wow, this one really cuts deep, especially in our world today. They actually believed that being seen, being heard, getting those notifications, that this kind of exposure was the same as having a real, substantial existence. Essentially, they traded real presence for just performance.
Which leads us to the parable's incredibly powerful conclusion. True speech only really begins when you recognize the tools of simulation for what they are, and you have the courage to put them down. It starts when you stop playing the game.
So naturally, we have to end with this question, turning the lens away from the parable and right back onto us. In all the ways we shout and post and share, it's really worth asking, is my controller plugged in? Are we just pressing buttons in some big flashy tournament, or are we actually plugged into truth, into power, and maybe most importantly of all, into each other?